Thank you so much for having me. It's great to talk to you guys tonight. Um, yes, as was mentioned, I'm the program manager of the Wildflower Foundation and the co-author of Native Plants for Florida Gardens, which I wrote with Nancy Bissett. If you're not familiar with our organization, our mission is to protect, connect, and expand native wildflower habitats through our education, research, and planting and conservation programs. You can learn more about our work at our website, flawildflowers.org. Most of our work is made possible through the sale and renewal of the Florida State Wildflower License Plate. This is our new license design. We had that other design for about 20 years, and now we have a lovely new plate. So the funds that we get from the license plate, along with donations and memberships, allow us to provide grants for native plant demonstration and school gardens throughout the state, to conduct research on many topics relevant to both commercial and residential horticultural interests, produce an array of helpful handouts and brochures on plant selection, growing and maintaining plants, attracting wildlife, and much, much more. We'd like to encourage those of you who find our programs valuable to consider becoming a member, making a donation, or purchasing the State Wildflower License Plate. Yes, this is our new book. It's not that new anymore. It came out in February, but I'm really happy to be here to talk about it. Again, it was written for the foundation by myself and Nancy Bissett, and many of you probably know Nancy. She's a longtime member of our board. She's also a biologist and a restoration ecologist, and is a co-owner with her husband, Bill, of The Natives, which is a native plant nursery and consulting and design firm in Davenport, Florida. We wrote this book with the hope that it would encourage people to add more native plants to their home, which in turn will attract more pollinators like our native bees and butterflies, provide food and habitat for wildlife, and add more connections and pathways to our natural areas. Florida is one of the most biodiverse states in the country. We have almost 3,000 native species, including more ancient species and families than any other state in the country. But we're also one of the fastest growing states. And so as much of our, oh, excuse me, sorry, I just knocked my headphones out. As much of our natural lands are used for development to accommodate this growth, we're losing that diversity. And I like to use Doug Tallamy. If you're not familiar with Doug, you really should be. He's the author of several books on the importance of planting natives in our landscape. And we have a webinar with him that we did earlier, not this year, last year. Forget that it's 2021 now. We did with him last May, and it's on our website and YouTube channel. But he says biodiversity can't be sustained in habitat fragments because they're too small and too isolated. And fragmenting our natural lands is what we're doing when we develop them as much as we are. Wildlife need these vast expanses of natural lands, but when we have these fragments, they need safe passage between them where they can find food and shelter and other resources. And so we need to look to our urban landscapes to help bridge that gap between these fragmented and increasingly smaller natural areas and provide pathways for birds, pollinators, and other wildlife. And we can do that with our home landscapes. But the plants that we choose need to do more than just be pretty. They need to play a role in our yard's ecosystems. So even the smallest native garden can provide essential resources for wildlife as long as we choose the right plants. So to share our built landscapes with wildlife, we need to, first and foremost, add more native plants to our landscapes. This means transitioning from commonly used non-native ornamentals that have little ecological value to native ornamentals that provide those resources. And yes, native plants can be ornamental. Many of our native plants, and I'll talk about quite a few of them tonight, but many of them provide year-round interest in the form of flowers, fruits, colorful foliage, interesting forms. They provide, things for us to improve our aesthetics, but they also provide essential resources for wildlife. And of course, we also need to reduce the amount of lawn in our yards. We mow, we herbicide, we put pesticide on our lawns. They have no ecological value. And they're really not doing anything for us other than causing heartache and a whole lot of work. So let's get rid of them, or at least reduce them. And when we do this, when we add more native plants to our landscapes and we reduce the amount of lawn and the amount of plants that have no ecological value, we are inviting wildlife into our landscapes. And this can encourage our neighbors to do the same, right? When they see these beautiful native landscapes alive with activity from birds and butterflies and other pollinators, we hope that they will want to do this too. And so in this way, we're helping to create pathways within our built environment that, again, provide that safe passageway and those essential resources for wildlife and pollinators going between those larger natural areas. So again, to quote Doug Tallamy, let's raise the bar for what our landscapes do, not just for us, but for wildlife. So I mentioned that, Florida's got almost 3,000 native species. These plants have evolved with our state's unique soil and climate conditions over thousands of years. That means that they have adapted to the conditions that we have here: drought, salt, hurricanes, seasonal climate fluctuations. And so for this reason, they're better suited than non-natives for survival in these sometimes harsh conditions. They're also better equipped to provide food and habitat to our native wildlife, including the pollinators that we need for our own food production. And of course, I don't have to tell you guys as Native Plant Society members, but native plants require less fertilizer, less water. They generally don't require herbicides and pesticides, certainly less than those plants that did not evolve here in these conditions and alongside our native pests. Our native plants also give back nutrients to the soil, which is needed to sustain other plants and organisms. It helps control erosion, and it can beautify our landscapes. A really good habitat has a variety of plant types. So we included a variety of plant types in our book. Wildflowers are great for creating a pleasing aesthetic while also providing nectar and pollen. They also provide nesting opportunities for many insects. They provide seeds for birds. And many birds favor the insects that are attracted to the wildflowers. Vines are great for adding vertical interest. They're also useful when you have limited space. You can plant something that's going to grow up when you don't have room for it to grow out and spread. And again, these vines provide food and cover for wildlife. Grasses are also essential. They give texture and movement to a landscape, and they literally support wildflowers. So planting a mix of wildflowers and grasses, these grasses can help keep your wildflowers, your tall wildflowers, standing tall. And they also offer seeds to birds and other wildlife. And of course, trees and shrubs are also important to a healthy, sustainable landscape. They can act as centerpieces. They can be planted together as a privacy screen or buffer. They also host a variety of microhabitats and provide cover and nesting opportunities for birds, small mammals, reptiles, amphibians, and insects. So in compiling the list of plants that we included in this book, we took into consideration not only the plants that are tried and true, that are easy to grow and maintain, but also ones that are readily available at nurseries that specialize in native plants. And there are lots of really cool native plants out there that might work well in a home landscape, but if you can't purchase them anywhere, it doesn't really help you to get excited about them. To find a native nursery in your area, check with the Florida Association of Native Nurseries website at plantrealflorida.org. If you're not familiar with them, it's a great resource for finding nurseries that are in the part of the state that you live in. Also, you can search by plant if there's a particular plant you're looking for and find out which nurseries around the state carry it. And if you are interested in working from seed, you can visit the Florida Wildflower Growers Cooperative at floridawildflowers.com. So the key to a healthy, thriving landscape is plant selection, choosing plants that are naturally suited to your yard's light and soil and moisture conditions are going to help ensure success and reduce maintenance requirements. So before you select plants, you want to evaluate your landscape's light conditions and soil and moisture and composition. Then you can use our quick reference guide to help narrow down the best plants for your location. So on each profile page in this book, you'll see a box in the upper right corner with icons that tell you, if the plant prefers full sun, partial sun, or mostly shade, if it does best in dry, moist, or wet conditions. We also give information on the plant's growth size, because most plants are not full grown when you purchase them. So you do want to consider that plant's potential height and width and give it the space it needs. In the quick reference guide, you'll also find the bloom color as well as when it blooms. So for year-round interest, you want to select plants that provide seasonal color and functional diversity. So choose wildflowers of different colors and height. Choose plants that bloom and produce fruit in different seasons, so you'll always have food and cover available for wildlife throughout the year. And of course, you want to include nectar and host plants to attract beneficial insects. So this is an example of what each plant entry looks like in the book. On the left-hand side, you'll see a full page photo of the plant, either a close-up of the flowers or fruits or different aspects of the plant. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see there in the upper right corner is that little quick reference key that I just showed you. And then we also have this narrative section that includes what habitats the plant naturally occurs in, so you know where to look for it when you're out hiking. What wildlife the plant attracts, including whether or not it's a host plant for anything in particular. We give some identification details just to help you recognize it. This is not meant to be a field guide necessarily, but it is important to know, what to expect from the plant and to help you identify it if you do see it out in the wild. And then in some cases, we also include notes on if and how the plant is edible to humans, as well as information on its name. There's sometimes you can get some clues out of a plant's common or scientific name. So I like to include that when we can. The bottom half of the page is kind of another quick reference, but it's going to give you more information on what to expect in your landscape. So a little more detail on its native range, bloom season, growth habit, exposure and soil requirements, but also information on propagation. Can I grow this plant from seed? Do seeds readily germinate or do they require special care? Can I grow it from cuttings? Things like that. We give information on the availability of plants. So what sizes they're generally available in. And we did check with a lot of different nurseries around the state, not only to, again, understand whether or not these plants are available, but also find out how you're going to, what the availability is and what size you're generally going to get them in. We also include information on how to plant them. How far apart do they need to be to get the particular aesthetic or whatever you're trying to accomplish with those plants. We include care tips. So if it requires pruning, if it's drought or salt tolerant, can I use it in mass as a buffer or screen, etc. Hardiness zones. So you know whether the plant is suited for the part of the state that you reside in. And then sometimes we'll include information on related species, including, in some cases, non-native or invasive varieties that you want to be aware of. And the book also includes a quick Get Growing guide, which includes information on watering, mulching, and other things that will help ensure a successful establishment of your native plants. So now I'm just gonna go through some of the plants that are included in the book. I chose some that are suited for use throughout the entire state for the most part, but plants that provide good resources for wildlife and that are also of particular interest to me as well. So these are a lot of my favorite plants. Florida Green Eyes is a nice perennial wildflower that is very attractive to bees and butterflies. It generally blooms